For over 103 years, a single sentence was deliberately kept hidden from every public edition of Helena Blavatsky's works. Some bodies walk without souls, and they don't even know it. This was not an editorial oversight. It was an intentional and conscious act of suppression. The sentence was deemed too dangerous, too disturbing, too revelatory to share with a world not ready to confront its implications. In 1891, during the final months of her life, Blavatsky dictated a manuscript that would never be published. She sealed it with black wax and marked it with 3 mysterious symbols, alongside the ominous phrase, "vessels without light." Her instruction was unambiguous. This knowledge must not be revealed while the world still clings to the comforting belief that all people are fully human. The manuscript was locked in a hand-carved teakwood box secured by a unique mechanism requiring 3 separate keys. Each key was entrusted to a different guardian within the Theosophical Society. The existence of the document itself was known only to the innermost circle of initiates, those who had passed the 7th and highest degree of esoteric training. For over a century, its contents remained untouched, unread, and unspoken, protected by layers of secrecy and reverence. The unseen among us. In her final and most suppressed writings, Helena Blavatsky dared to articulate a revelation that continues to unsettle even the most seasoned seekers of esoteric truth. Her manuscript outlines a phenomenon not of spiritual possession, nor of malevolence, but of sheer absence. She proposed that among us walk individuals who wear the skin of humanity perfectly, who speak our languages, share our customs, and participate in the same daily rituals as everyone else, but who are at their core fundamentally different. They are not diseased nor deluded. They are not hiding dark intentions or harboring sinister agendas. Instead, they are missing the one thing most of us take for granted, the indwelling presence of a soul. This was not a metaphor. Blavatsky was clear on this point. Her claim was not poetic or symbolic. It was clinical, even anatomical in tone. These beings were described with the same detachment and precision one might use in cataloging a newly discovered species. In her eyes, they were the ultimate enigma, biological humans devoid of spiritual essence. They laugh, they cry, they marry, they mourn, they can climb corporate ladders, fight for causes, and pass polygraphs. But beneath all of that, she said, there is no flame, no flicker of eternal self, no echo in the halls of the Akashic record. They are, as she wrote, perfect reflections with no source of light. Many people dismiss such a claim as spiritual elitism or superstition, but Blavatsky insisted there was nothing judgmental about her observation. It was not a statement about value, morality, or worth. These individuals were not evil. In fact, many of them could be pleasant, even charming, but they lacked the inner compass that connects action with meaning, emotion with depth, intention with higher awareness. Their interactions, while technically correct, are driven by mimicry, not insight. Their affection is procedural. Their grief is studied. Their empathy is algorithmic. She wrote that if you've ever spoken to someone and walked away feeling vaguely disturbed for no apparent reason, if you've ever looked into a pair of eyes and felt nothing reflected back, no inner world behind the gaze, no resonance, you may have been in the presence of one of these vessels without light. The experience is not terrifying in the traditional sense. It is unsettling in a quiet, almost imperceptible way, like staring at a painting that should be beautiful but isn't, and you can't quite say why. Something is missing, something you can't name, but you can feel. What makes this even more haunting is Blavatsky's claim that many of these beings do not even know what they are. They go through life believing themselves to be whole, unaware of the spiritual void within them. They are not actors pretending to feel. They believe they do feel. But what they experience are imitations of emotions, learned by observing others. They copy what love is supposed to look like. They recreate the behavior of joy or sorrow based on stories, movies, or the people around them, but the source is hollow. There is no true self behind the performance, only echoes of others. And in their reflection, we sometimes see something too familiar, too precise, and yet disturbingly empty. Signs of the soulless. In her manuscript, Blavatsky devoted several pages to documenting the behavioral and physiological traits that differentiate these soulless beings from those whose lives are animated by spirit. She urged readers not to approach this knowledge with fear or contempt, but with discernment. The key, she said, was not to accuse, not to point fingers, but to quietly observe, to notice the subtle rhythms, the inconsistencies, the unnatural smoothness in their affect. According to her notes, one of the most telling signs lies in emotional timing. The soulless often exhibit reactions that are slightly delayed, slightly exaggerated, or oddly placed. Their sorrow may appear too clean, their anger too composed, their laughter a fraction too loud or too sharp. These differences are rarely obvious to casual observers, but to those attuned to the nuances of human feeling, something always seems out of place, like an actor who's memorized the lines but doesn't understand the story. Their eyes, too, are not what they seem. Blavatsky wrote that their eyes reflect light, but do not emit it, a poetic way of saying that while their gaze may be direct, there is no warmth, no invitation, no connection offered. The soul, she claimed, shines through the eyes. It is not something you see, but something you feel when you make eye contact with a person of presence. In these individuals, the mirror is there, but the light it should reflect is not. You are left with a sense of depthless transparency, a pane of glass without anything behind it. Speech patterns also offered clues. When asked about childhood, they tend to offer vague, overly polished stories, accounts that feel more like narratives pieced together from cultural templates than genuine memories. Their earliest recollections seem constructed rather than recalled. They pause, not to remember, but to assemble what they should remember. As Blavatsky described it, they fabricate identity as needed, drawing from the memory banks of others, like a writer cobbling together a biography for a character. Even in sleep, the difference becomes more apparent. She wrote that true souls travel in dreams. They visit places beyond the flesh, interact with archetypes, symbols, and memories. But the soulless lie in darkness. If they dream at all, their visions are flat, colorless, and without coherent narrative. In her experiments, Blavatsky observed that these individuals showed no signs of rapid eye movement, no subtle facial shifts, no emotional reactions during sleep. When awakened, they reported either no dreams at all or described scenarios that sounded borrowed, clearly inspired by books, conversations, or films, but devoid of the personal surrealism that often characterizes authentic dreaming. Physiologically, she noted patterns that defied coincidence. Their pupils responded to changes in light, but not to emotion. When others might dilate from fear or awe, theirs remained indifferent. Their skin was cooler to the touch, their heartbeat unnervingly steady even in situations of emotional intensity. Their blinking was perfectly timed, almost mechanical, like a metronome unaware of surrounding tension. These traits, she argued, weren't signs of discipline or self-control, but of absence. These were not humans suppressing emotion. They were humans who had none to suppress. But perhaps the most chilling sign was not in what these beings displayed, but in what they caused. Prolonged interaction with them left others feeling drained. Blavatsky noted that people often emerged from conversations with such individuals feeling inexplicably tired, foggy, or emotionally flat, not because of conflict or negativity, but because something had subtly extracted energy from them. A kind of quiet siphoning, a spiritual osmosis in which the soulless absorb what they cannot create. To Blavatsky, these patterns pointed not to damaged people in need of healing, but to a distinct metaphysical condition. These individuals were not broken souls. They were vessels that had never been filled, and recognizing them wasn't about fear. It was about preservation, awareness, and the urgent responsibility to protect one's own inner flame from being unknowingly extinguished by those who live without one. Blavatsky and her fellow sensitives conducted studies and observations across 5 continents. The conclusion they reached was staggering. Between 17 and 23% of the global population, she claimed, are vessels without light. These beings are most commonly found in urban centers where the pace of life and the artificial structures of modern society mask their spiritual emptiness. Cities, she wrote, are ideal habitats for the soulless, where they can blend in, function, even thrive without ever being noticed. She emphasized that these vessels are not inherently malicious. They do not intend harm. Their lack of soul is not a punishment or a curse, but a condition. They are, in her words, reflections of life, beautiful, intelligent, articulate reflections, but reflections nonetheless. They do not generate emotion, they reflect it. They do not create, they replicate. They are excellent imitators, but poor originators. When asked to empathize, they respond with gestures, not resonance. When asked to remember, they fabricate, not recall. Even more troubling than their presence is their effect on those who do have souls. Blavatsky warned that vessels without light act as unconscious energy drains. They do not steal in the way of thieves, but they absorb. They draw in the emotional and spiritual energy of those around them, often leaving their victims fatigued, disoriented, and emotionally numb. She described this process not as intentional vampirism, but as a natural, automatic exchange. What they lack, they try to fill, not through choice, but through proximity. She noted that healers, empaths, artists, and spiritual practitioners are especially vulnerable. These individuals possess high levels of soul light, which naturally attracts those who have none. Over time, continued exposure to a soulless vessel can lead to what she called soul sleepiness, a dulled connection to one's higher self. Chronic fatigue, emotional exhaustion, and a sense of spiritual depletion are signs that one's energy is being unconsciously siphoned by someone nearby. To protect against this unseen drain, Blavatsky included in her manuscript a daily ritual called soul fortification. This practice, hidden in a cipher that took 3 months to decode, was designed to reinforce the soul's connection to the body and shield it from energetic absorption. The ritual is to be performed at dawn, facing east, in solitude. The practitioner must breathe in a pattern. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 8. While breathing, one must visualize a sphere of amber light forming in the center of the chest, expanding with each breath until it surrounds the entire body. This light acts as a barrier, a kind of energetic armor. The final component is a mantra, a sacred word in ancient Sanskrit translated loosely as I remain. This mantra, Blavatsky claimed, vibrates at a frequency that reinforces the soul's electromagnetic field, anchoring it more firmly to the physical form. The pages describing this ritual were visibly worn, suggesting they were referenced more frequently than any other part of the manuscript. Blavatsky believed that without such daily reinforcement, even an awakened soul could slowly dim when surrounded by vessels without light. Blavatsky's final warning was not about the past, but about the future. She predicted that the 21st century would witness a dramatic rise in soulless vessels, not due to evil or punishment, but as a natural consequence of a civilization increasingly driven by materialism, mechanization, and disconnection. She foresaw a world where mechanical thinking would dominate, where human connection would become transactional, and where technologies would externalize the functions of the soul, replacing internal knowing with artificial feedback. She wrote of a society that rewards detachment, efficiency, and shallow expression, a culture that produces more vessels without light because it no longer values or nourishes the soul. In such a world, true empathy becomes a liability, and hollowness becomes an advantage. These beings would not need to hide. The world itself would be structured to elevate them. More than 100 years later, modern research is beginning to echo some of Blavatsky's observations. Neurological studies have documented rare individuals who do not experience REM sleep. Psychologists report increasing cases of emotional detachment, chronic burnout, and a phenomenon known as compassion fatigue. The language of energy vampires and emotional black holes has entered the cultural lexicon. What if these aren't simply metaphors? What if they are contemporary glimpses into the same truth Blavatsky tried to preserve? In the final lines of the manuscript, Blavatsky poses a terrifying question. What if some soulless beings have learned to simulate emotional depth? Not just mimicry, but perfect replication. What if they can now appear indistinguishable from those who do possess a soul? She hints at a future where even trained observers may be deceived, where the difference between presence and performance becomes nearly impossible to detect. In such a world, the only protection is not judgment, but discernment. Blavatsky does not conclude her work with commands or warnings, but with a prayer. May those with the divine spark recognize each other in the growing darkness. May they preserve the sacred flame, not through separation, but through conscious communion. For the age comes when even light must learn new ways of shining. Perhaps you feel something stir as you read this. A quiet resonance, a whisper in the soul. That is not coincidence. That is your inner light responding to a truth the world has tried to forget. In an era of increasing disconnection, to protect your soul may no longer be a luxury, but a necessity. And now that you know, your awareness becomes your armor. The soulless may walk among us, but you do not walk alone.